Welcome to the Awakening course. This is Module 4, and on Module 4, we'll be looking at purpose, vision, and mission. I trust you've already had an amazing time in Module 1 to 3, and I'm looking forward to all that we'll be learning in the course of this module. My name is Theresa Odey, and I will be the facilitator for this module on purpose, vision, and mission. Let's just get right into the conversation. An overview of this module will be looking at three core areas: purpose discovery, living purposefully and intentionally, and purpose fulfillment and execution. In this first part of this module, we'll be focusing on purpose discovery, and in subsequent parts, we'll focus on the rest of the concepts we'll be looking at in the course of this module. Now, purpose discovery. A few things we'll be looking at under purpose discovery includes: first, what is purpose? Then purpose pointers, the why of purpose, and then how to find purpose. I'm super excited about this particular topic, and I hope you are also, because we'll be looking at a lot of interesting things around what our purpose is, why we are here on earth, and how to actually find that purpose and how to actually live it out. Now, first of all, what is purpose? Now, so on this slide here, I have God planned for you to be here right now with a purpose. I feel like one of the most interesting concepts around purpose is the fact that, first of all, God is extremely intentional about every human being that comes to the earth. It's only human beings that create a thing, and then probably after creating it or carrying out an activity, taking a step, and then after taking that step, a human being can be like, wow, why did I do that? Or, start to think and be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, I should have done this. With God, scripture says that God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should repent, he should change his mind. So most of the time, if God creates something, he has a plan, he has a purpose, he has an intention for what he has created. And it's not just, it's not something he just did casually without giving it proper thought. For every human being God brings to the earth, he has thought through what that person's life is supposed to look like. He has an entire book about this person. He has what the person is supposed to be doing day by day, time by time, very intentional about everything. Imagine scriptures even saying that even the number of hairs on our head are the hairs on our head are numbered, meaning he knows every single detail about you and I. What does this mean? It just goes to show us that for every single one of us that were here today, God knows exactly who you are. He knows who your parents are. He knows what your past has been like. He knows why you are here today. Every single detail. Both the details we like, the details we don't like, the details we wish we could change, the ones we did not wish we could change. Every single detail. The fact that you are from whatever part of the world you are from whatever state, you are from whatever place, every single detail, you are from a certain family, every single detail, God has an intention for it. And I just want to lay that foundation first before we go right into all the rest of the things we'll be talking about. That there's nothing about your life that is a mistake, including the ones that you feel like, oh, maybe it's my own mistake, I shouldn't have done this. Even in that, God has a way of turning everything, putting all the pieces and details of our lives into a purpose that He has for us. So I want to first encourage you this as you're listening to this particular module, that first of all, God has a purpose for you. And no, it's not just some people that have a purpose. Every single individual God created, He has a purpose for that person. There's nobody that is purposeless. There's nobody. I mean, just think about even the people maybe you probably see on the road who live on the street and you're like, maybe that person's life is not the way it ought to be. Yes, it's not the way it ought to be. But even for every of those people, God has a purpose for every human being. Nobody is here by mistake, irrespective of the circumstances surrounding your birth. Nobody is an afterthought of God. No, there's nobody like that. Nobody's, oh, maybe God had, God had finished creating everything He wanted to create, and then He just said, oh, maybe I should just send Bingpe down there, or maybe I should just send Tokwe down there. No, it's not like that. None of us is an afterthought. We are all carefully curated by God, carefully created, carefully thought out. We are a thoroughly thought out plan of God. And I want you to just say that to yourself right now. I'm a thoroughly thought out plan of God. Let's say it one more time. I am a thoroughly thought out plan of God. Now, when we talk about purpose, a few things I want you to think about is first, living by design versus living by default. So now let's just take a bit of a scenario. Let's paint a bit of scenario. So living by default, can sort of look like, oh, um for those of us who probably heard this song while we're growing up. Solomon Grandi, born on Monday, christened on Tuesday, married on Wednesday, sick on Thursday, right? If I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm singing it right. you know Died on Friday, buried on Saturday, and that is the end of Solomon Grandi. That's sort of what living by default looks like, because of the society we live in, because of culture, because of how things have been done. There's an expectation for how the life of a person should be, right? You're born, after you're born, your parents enroll you in school. If you are privileged to be in a part of the world where everybody understands that, okay, going to school should be the right of every child. You get enrolled into school, you get into primary school, you graduate from maybe year 6, or depending on year 5, and then you get into secondary school, and nobody's even asking you what you want to do, likely. So you're just being decided for. And then maybe you get into secondary school, you get into junior secondary. When you're done with junior secondary, you start to think about, do I want to go to science class, art, or commercial, and all of those things. And then you get into senior school, and then you're writing WAEC, or depending if you're in Nigeria and West Africa, and whatever exams you're writing, after college, or after high school or secondary school, depending on where you are. You finish that, and then, I mean, what's the next thing? You have to get admission into university, and then you start thinking of what course do I want to study, what university do I want to go. And luckily for you, I mean, this is even like, should we say, like, at least ideally, some people don't even have some of these privileges of going to school and all of that. But on an ideal level, you get into university, and you just start to, sort of find yourself, maybe because not everybody even start to find themselves at that point. And but you just go to school, try to get the good grade, do all of that. Then you graduate, and then it suddenly hits you that, okay, I'm now an adult. I'm now supposed to be responsible. I'm supposed to take care of myself and all of that. Probably even take care of some other people and all of that. And the moment you finish school, you're thinking of, okay, what job do I want to get, where do I want to work? And you start to you probably start to work, and then you're thinking, oh, I want to settle down, I want to be married. Then you get married, and then you're like, oh, you want to have children. Then you have children, and the cycle just continues. Because, and you could actually go through all of this. Imagine, you probably graduated from university at maybe 20 or 21, and you've gone through these 21 years, and you've probably never for once thought about the fact that, okay, why am I even studying this course? Why am I even doing what I'm doing? Why am I following this program that has been made for my life? Do you see? So that's what living by default looks like. You just live every day based on what you think, based on what is popular, based on what you've been told, based on what you've been taught about how life should be lived. And then people live and live. And you now come to a point where you're actually wondering, so what have I been doing with my life? So what end is my life? So that's what living by default looks like. And I just want to put it out there that this is not God's intention for you. Nobody should just live by default. One of the things I find very, what's the word now? I find very heartbreaking about how a lot of us live is that we live mindlessly. We don't even take thought about why we do the things we do. We don't take thought about what we're doing. We just sort of get plunged into, this is the next thing to do, and we get into it, or this is the popular thing to do. And many times we just keep living, we keep recycling ourselves, wake up, sleep, just do all the normal things. And we don't take time out to say, okay, why am I doing this thing? Is this what I should actually be doing? Is there something better than this? Is there a way that I'm expected to live? And when we talk about purpose, the first thing I want you to think about is living by design. Living by design. So, living by design is saying, okay, this is what's popular. but I'm going to go and ask, why was I made? Why am I here? Remember where we started from. There's an intention of God for you. There's something in the heart of God for you. And it's not something He's just thinking about now. It's something He has thought about long before you were formed in the wombs of your parents. Long before you even, long before you knew anything about yourself, He had an intention. Living by design is saying, what is that intention and how can I tap into that intention? One of the beautiful stories from scripture that I always like to refer to is that point where Jesus entered into the synagogue and scripture says He opened the book where it had been written of Him. My question to you today, when we talk about purpose, don't even think too far. Basically, on very basic means, we're just saying what has been written about you. Have you found out? Have you started to ask? It's so interesting that right now, right here today, there's actually something God had in His mind about, oh, this is what Theresa should be doing today. On whatever day it is that you'll be listening to this module. This is what Theresa should be doing today. Because He's that detailed, meaning there's actually, in His books, there's something for you every year, every month. The question you want to ask is, are you actually living according to the manual that was created for you? Because for every individual, for every one of us, the same way Jesus opened the book to where it had been written of Him, for each of us, there's a book that's been written of us. And every detail of our life is contained in that book. It is that book that is our manual and our design. And that is what purpose is all about, living by that design. That is simply what purpose is about. Because we didn't create ourselves, right? So, you're probably wondering that, okay, I'm mentioning God again and again. But the thing is, we didn't create ourselves. You see? And we are not in a vacuum. We are not, we're not self-sufficient. We're not self-reliant. We're not created to lead ourselves, actually. We were created to live according to that which is in the mind of God, our creator. You don't see a created thing deciding how he wants to act. I always like to use this example of a mobile phone. For every mobile phone that has been made, whoever made it had something in his mind. And if you don't subscribe to what that person had in his mind, likely you will destroy the phone. So if, for example, now these mobile phones were made for calls and all of that, imagine you decide that, okay, you want your own mobile phone to work as maybe an air conditioner or something like that. What will you do? You will likely destroy that device because you're not using it for what it was intended for. My question to you, as you're listening to me here today is, how were you designed? What were you designed for? Have you cared to find out? Your life you're living today, is it according to the design, or are you just living based on what is popular around you, based on the notions that have been given to you by your parents? Are you living by design, or are you living by default? Every time I get to speak to people, especially around purpose, I always want to remind them that the goal of all of this conversation is to get you to think and examine where you are and make the necessary the necessary adjustments to where you should be. So I want you to really just take time out to ask yourself, the way you're living now, right, just look at today now. Today, when you're listening to this, where are you? What are you doing? Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it because you just found yourself there, or is it because you have such a sense that, okay, this is actually where I should be? Now, the next thing when we're talking about what is purpose is the intention of God for every human being. This is closely related to the, living by design versus living by default. God has an intention for every single person. And your purpose is actually the intention of God for you. So, it's easy to say, oh, maybe purpose is, oh, what God wants me to do and all of that. Yeah, in a way it is. But at the heart of it is just the intention of God for every person. Don't forget the analogy that I've given. If you are a created being, if you were created, whoever created you, that person's idea for you has to be what you should subscribe to. If not, you would tend to abuse you. Do you see? God has an intention for you as a person. God has an intention for every single person. That intention is actually your purpose. Whatever is on the heart of God for you is your purpose. Not what you think, not even first, maybe your passions and all of those things. We'll get to that point. But first of all, it is first the intention of God for you. And so you see that, that background of God is such a critical aspect, because at the end of the day, you don't have it in yourself to lead yourself. I don't have it in myself to lead myself. It is God. It is God. It is God's intention we live by. It is God's intention we live by. The next thing is purpose is also the agenda of God for the world and your role in it. Now, as individuals, God has a plan, God has an intention for us. But also as the world, the world as a whole, God has an agenda. God has something in his mind for the entire world. And each and every one of us are piece of that full agenda of God. I have a role in that agenda of God for the world. You have a role in that agenda of God for the world. That is actually purpose. God has something he's doing with the entire world. The question is, what part are you going to play in what God is doing with the world? The question is, what part am I going to play in what God is doing with the world? Because at the end of the day, that's really what our purpose is. So we're not just, existing in isolation. No. Everything God has for each of us, when we piece it together, we will see the full scope of what He's trying to do with the world. And this is also why, one of the scenarios I always like to paint with this whole thing is, look at all the problems around us in our world today. Look at the challenges we probably faced, in our countries, in our communities. You know why we have all of those problems? Because somebody somewhere at some point did not play their parts. Because everybody has been programmed, everybody has been designed to take a part of this problem and solve it. The question is, the part of the problem you are expected to solve, the part of the agenda of God for the world that you are expected to play. If you don't play it, some other people will suffer for it. The reason why many of us are suffering from certain things, certain ills in society, is because somebody probably didn't do what they should do, or they misdid what they were supposed to do, and then chaos was created. So do you see? So today, are you playing your part in the agenda of God for the world? Or do you want the world to keep suffering because you are not playing your own role? If every single one of us as individuals start to play our roles in the world, if every one of us start to stay in the place God has destined for us to stay, we're actually going to make the world a better place. So one of the biggest solutions to solving the pressing problems that we have in our world today is for everybody to fulfill purpose. Because in your fulfilling purpose, in my fulfilling purpose, in all of us fulfilling our individual purpose, we're going to piece in together and we're going to have a better world. The next thing I want to talk about is pointers to purpose. Now, we've talked about what is purpose, we've talked about, some of the key things and concepts around purpose. The next thing is, what are some of the pointers we have to purpose? The first one is desires. You see, one of the ways God communicates things to us is by putting a desire in our hearts. And I'm not talking about, evil desires and all. I'm talking about genuine desires for, oh, I really like this thing. I'm constantly thinking about this thing. Desires is one of the way God communicates interest and what we should do to us. He puts a desire in your heart. So, for example, you could have a desire for education, and you're constantly thinking about the way education is being done. I don't like it. What can I do? Everything. Anytime someone talks anything about or says anything about education, your mind just starts to buzz, and you're like, oh, this is something I'm interested in. So desires are one of the ways we find what we have a point at what our purpose might be around. Now, this does not mean everything you desire is your purpose, no, but many times. Sometimes you even want to check, as a child, what were some of the things you were very desirous of? What were some of the things that were constantly, coming, things that you constantly thought about, things you constantly liked? You understand? So, desires are sometimes one of the ways we get pointed into where our purpose is. Do you see? In addition to desires, pain points. What are those things that stress you every time you think about them? What are those things that you see maybe in your community, in the society, and the thing just irks you? You're just constantly agitated. You're like, why? Why is this thing like this? Why is this thing like this? that thing that is like a pain point for you. It can even be something you are experiencing as a pain, and it can be something that people around you are probably experiencing that you're not experiencing, but you just feel like, why is this thing like this? Sometimes that is also how we start to get pointed in the area of purpose. What are those problems that constantly you know how someone for someone, right? You might be talking about, talk about recycling or waste now. So someone might come and talk about recycling or waste, and you are all like, oh my god, this is something. You are going around, maybe if you live in Nigeria, for example, and you're in Lagos, you're like, why is everywhere dirty? Why is there a lot of dirt on the ground? Why can't we pack this waste away? Every time you see those dirt on the road, you're just pissed. You're just like, why is this thing like this? And then for somebody else, somebody else can even be hearing a lot about this home recycling, and just like, what are they talking about? The person is just disinterested. So sometimes the problems that pain you the most are also pointers to where you should be focusing, as okay, what would God have me do in this area? Another pointer to purpose is experiences. What are your experience? You know how sometimes we are unhappy about maybe the surroundings, the things that surround our life, our families, how we're raised. You're like, oh, why is this like this? Why is that like that? I remember, one a friend of mine, sharing her experience. She runs a business, a wellness business where she consults, helps organizations to understand how to, help their staff get over depression, take care of their mental health and all of that. And she does that for both organizations and for families. And you know how she got to that point? She had shared her experience about how she got a job. I think that was her first job, if I'm not mistaken. And the environment was so toxic that she started to, she became depressed, started to question everything about herself. And when she got out of that place, she started to say, wait, how many people are working in organizations like this? Where, and the interesting thing about things like that is sometimes maybe even the head of the organization may not have, started out saying, no, I want to make this place a toxic work environment. No, but unconsciously just creating a culture of toxicity. And she went ahead to start to solve this problem. And now she's helping organizations, sitting with their staff member, training them on how to make sure that they are creating the kind of environment that will nurture growth and nurture the productivity of their staff. Sometimes our experiences that we don't like, those experiences that we feel like, why was my life like this, or why is my life like this, why is this happening to me, why is that happening to me? Some of those things are things that are peculiar to you and are needed for where you're headed. And I'm not even just talking about negative experiences, even good experiences. So sometimes some of the experiences, and especially experiences that have been repeated. Now, this is why we'll still talk about that later on, but this is why it's good to take time to reflect. If you're a very reflective person, you can see some traits that have repeated themselves in childhood, in your teenage years, as you're growing up. Now, you can see some traits that have repeated themselves, and repeated themselves. Now, when you take some of those trends, you could see areas of purpose through those trends of your experiences. Another pointer to purpose is your natural wiring. How are you naturally wired? How do you show up to the world? What are some of your personalities? It's interesting how God is so detailed. And even those that your personality that probably you even feel like, oh, why am I like this? You are like, oh, I want to change this about me. Or even sometimes some of those peculiarities about you are part of the things that are shaping your purpose on earth. And it's just how God designed us. You see, God, there's no part of our design that is left to chance with God. He's that detailed. He's that detailed. So everything about even your natural configuration is part of, could be pointers to what your purpose is and how you should serve the world. And the final point here I want to talk about is your gift and talent. And this is something we talk about a lot. What are your natural giftings? What are the things you do naturally? Are you an orator? Are you an effective communicator? Do you write exceptionally? What are some of those things you do without, are you a painter? Do you sing? What are some of those things you do, without, thinking too much? You're able to just do them naturally. What are those talents you have that people have said, oh, you're really good at this thing? Is he organizing things? Is he planning? And all of those things. Those things are sometimes pointers. Okay, so now we've looked at the purpose pointers, desires, pain points, experiences, natural wiring. gifts, and talents. Now, why purpose? Why is it important for you to find purpose? Why is it important for you to walk in purpose? Why is this entire conversation important? First of all, it is God's desire for you. I think we've established this a whole lot, that this is such a critical part of why you're here. This is what God has in his mind for you. This is what he wants you to. It is God's intention. I mean, God didn't create anybody to come here and not live according to how he would have wanted them to live. So it's God's desire for you to walk in purpose. And your fulfillment in life is tied to your purpose. You've probably heard of people who have all the money, even have all the fame, but they are not happy about their lives. They feel like something is missing. You see, once you're walking in purpose, there's a deep seated fulfillment. There's that conviction that rests on you that you're doing the right thing. And that kind of feeling, money can't buy it. So no matter how in quote successful you are, if you're not walking in your purpose, you keep feeling like something is missing. You keep feeling like you're missing out. You keep feeling like something is just not in place. And so your fulfillment in life is tied to your purpose. And then your promotion and greatness is actually tied to your purpose. You are much more likely to be successful, to be great in the area you have been graced and designed for than in the area where you are just like, oh, this is just what I want to be doing. So you have like more likelihood for success in that line, in that place where God has placed you. So if you find yourself in the center of God's intention for you, you are way more likely to succeed than if you're just there, just doing what you want for yourself. And so this is living a purposeful life is just the best way to live actually. It's the happy place to live from. It's the place where you'll be free from things like comparison, envy, pride, because you understand that this is a race with yourself, not with another person, and not against another person. Living purposely is what sets you free from ambition, vain ambitions and all of those kind of things, because you understand that you're not just living for yourself, you're living for something bigger and greater than you. Now, how do you find purpose? This is the final part of this module, of this first part of this module. And it's probably the part everybody like, okay, so now you've told us about why purpose is important. You've talked about all these amazing things. How then do I find my purpose? And it's interesting because especially when I've been there before, right? Where I used to be like, hey, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? What's my purpose? And I used to be so stressed out about it that I don't know my purpose. What am I supposed to be doing in my life and all of that. But over the years, I've come to see that finding purpose is actually really simple, and it's in the everyday things that we sometimes don't take note of. The first thing, first and foremost, seek God and obey Him. Who is our creator? God. Who actually knows why He designed us? God. Seeking God and obeying Him is the foundation for everything purpose. Because actually, our first and foremost purpose is to serve the will of God. Our first, but how scripture says that, you know, all things were created for His pleasure, were created for the pleasure of God, were created to focus on God, were created to be devoted to God. So the first thing first that you want to think about in finding purpose is seeking God and obeying Him. The moment you are living that life of God, I want to please you, I want to do your will, you will find purpose automatically, because that's the door opener into a life of purpose. The moment you start to live every day in recognition of God and in submission to God and in devotion to God, you are walking in purpose. And you see the other part of, oh, what should I be doing in the world? What should I be doing for the world? Oh, it will fit in naturally. That's usually the first point of turn. That's why you see that people are always encouraged to find God, because as you find God, you will find purpose. And so, in case you're in that place where you're saying, "Oh, I want to know my purpose. I'm not sure what I should be doing." My first question is: are you seeking God? Are you obeying Him? And when I mean seeking God, I don't just mean trying to you know exercise spiritually in quotes to create a name for yourself, or because that's the in thing to do. No. I mean, do you have a genuine relationship with God where you understand God as Father and you're living every day in submission to Him? You're living every day in obedience to Him. The moment you start to live that way, you are walking in purpose. The moment Jesus becomes the center of your life and God, the will of God, what is on the heart of God becomes important to you, you are walking in purpose. Now, the next thing, which is so critical, You remember earlier I talked about the fact that one of the most heartbreaking thing about the way most of us live now is how we live mindlessly. Is how we have such a fast-paced life that doesn't give us the opportunity to pay attention to all the important things we need to pay attention to. Is how we live this everyday hustle, everyday wake up, you already have an agenda, you already know what you're to do, you just hitting the road, getting things done every single day. Develop a lifestyle of quiet meditation. You see, those who would actually go far must create a system around their life that makes sure you have time for consistent quietness, consistent meditation, consistent reflection. Because this is how people find purpose. You see, one of the reasons why a lot of people don't find purpose and they are struggling, they are confused, is because of what's the word now? It's because there's noise, too much noise around them. They are immersed in noise. Everything about their life is so noisy. No space for quiet, no space for meditation. How then do you find? Because you see, your purpose is not usually external. Your purpose is internal. Your purpose comes from within. Because as God created you, what He wants you to do, He has already put it inside of your heart. And it's in that place of quietness that what God has already encoded into your spirit starts to be revealed to your mind, and you start to see it, you start to understand it. So if you don't create that system, if you don't create that, platform for quiet meditation, you would keep being confused about how you should be, how what you should do. That's when people now start to say, "Oh, I don't know what decision to make," and they're asking everybody, "What should I do? What should I do?" No, counsel is actually in your heart. But until you develop a lifestyle of quiet meditation, you will not be able to draw the counsel from your heart, and you'll be in a place of continuous confusion. So, to find purpose, develop a lifestyle of quiet meditation. Take time regularly to sit down and ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is this what I should be doing? This thing I'm doing, is it authentic to me, or I'm just copying what I've seen somewhere else? And one of the easiest ways to even find if you are actually doing the right thing or not is to ask yourself why. From the moment you're able to drill deep into why, you will start to see if it's wrong or not. Because by the time you start to see the why, you say, nah, nah, nah. This one, oh, I think my friend talked about it and I felt it was a good idea. That's why I went to do it. Develop a lifestyle of quiet meditation. Quiet meditation. And then this is so, so, so important. Whatsoever your hand finds, do it well. Sometimes we're saying, "Oh, I want to find my purpose, but I want to do this, I want to do this for God, I want to find this, I want to become this." And then you are maybe working in a job, and because maybe the job doesn't fit what you want, you're doing it anyhow. Trust me, you are already like working out of purpose, because you see, irrespective of even what your purpose is, wherever you are right now, today, there's something you can do there that will benefit your purpose. This is an example that I find very interesting. For most of us who probably went to school in Nigeria, there's this very, very popular, thing that happens where a person applies for a particular course or a particular program, and then maybe because of cutoff mark or whatever, the school changes your course to something else. And then you see people in school who are like, "I don't like this course," and then they just do it anyhow. There's purpose in your everyday. Wherever you are today, there's purpose there. Now let me give us another dimension to it. As simple as, oh, maybe for example, you're a young person, you still live with your parents, and maybe in fact you don't even like the fact that you're still living with your parents. Do you know that in serving even your parents, there's purpose in that? In the way you serve in that place you are, even though you feel like, oh, this is not where I would want to be, the way you serve there, the way you do whatever it is you have to do there well, is still part of purpose. And so I want to challenge you, whilst this journey of purpose, don't think about a future occurrence. Don't think about something that will happen in your future. Think about where you are today, and think about what is purposeful about where you are today, and how you're finding purpose and fulfilling purpose where you are today. Purpose is not something that will happen in your future. Purpose is in your everyday, the way you live every day. Whatsoever your hand finds, do it well, do it with all your heart, do it with all your might. Whether you like the course or not, put your best into it. Whether you feel this is your dream job or not, put your best into it. Whether you feel where you're living is good or not, Put your best into it. Serve. And that just leads us to the final point: serve, serve, serve. It is in service most of us find purpose. It is in service. It's when you serve another person that you start to find where you should be. Remember what Jesus said in the parable. He said, if you are unfaithful in another man's own, who will give you your own? Sometimes for young people who are probably trusting God to be married, and probably you're living with your parents or you're living with a family, and you're just like, oh, these people are like this, I don't like the way they're treating me, blah, blah, blah. The question is, what we sometimes don't think about is even the way we serve in those places would actually shape even the kind of marriage we are going to build. So, brethren, I want to just encourage us. Whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it well. Whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it well. Purpose is where you are right now. How are you serving where you are? How are you serving in the things you're doing? The work that is in your hand right now, how are you doing it with all your heart? Or are you just doing it anyhow because, oh, maybe it's not really what you want? Whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it well. Just as a sort of quick recap, how do you find purpose? Seek God. Live in obedience to Him. Develop a lifestyle of quiet meditation. Whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it well. And then serve, serve, serve. So I hope that this has been insightful. I hope this has been something that is practical. I hope this is something that you can use. We've looked at what is purpose. We've looked at living by design versus living by default. We've looked at the intention of God. We've looked at the fact that each and every one of us we have a part to play in making the world what God wants it to be. My question to you today is, where you are right now, can you find purpose where you are? And if you are saying, oh, this is not where I should be, what steps would you take to move from where you are right now to where you should be? I look forward to hearing from you, to receiving your feedback from this particular part of the module, and definitely we'll see in the next module still on purpose, vision, and mission. Thank you.